How many of you know what I'm going to talk about today? You know the title of my talk?
I know the theme of your talk.
Well, I just asked that because if I want to talk about golf, I can, because you didn't come here expecting it.
We're waiting for the
But,
vote.
well, that's the title. Let's go voting. Let's go voting, because we're going to share the insights that we have in metaphysics about one of the great stories of the Old Testament, which is Noah and the Ark. And it's been interesting to me that this past couple of weeks, since I made that decision to talk about Noah and the Ark, how many things have come up to my attention about Noah and the Ark. For instance, in the Wood Creek News, which comes out in my area, there's a picture of a lady here who's making a presentation. She made it yesterday, I think it was, at a church in Sacramento. She's got a model of the ark that she has built. And she is presenting that all over. So obviously, a lot of people are very concerned still about Noah and the ark. But I also watch a show called Jeopardy! And I enjoy trying to see if I can think of the answers, you know. And they had a question about, I forget how they phrased it, but it was about, the answer was Noah. And I was so pleased that nobody had. But not surprisingly, none of the wise people knew Noah. But I did, and I thought, well, there's Noah and the ark again. And I forget, there was a third one that came up. And of course, some people say, well, those things are always happening, but it's only because you're thinking about it that you notice it. But no, I would have noticed Noah and the ark anywhere. So I say that Spirit is wanting us to think about Noah and the ark today. How many of you are familiar with the ark that has been built in Williamstown, Kentucky? Okay, a couple of you. So let me tell you about it. A man down there who is obviously a fundamentalist, who takes the Bible very literally, has built a 500-foot long version of the ark. It's 5 stories high. He has put $100 million into its construction. However, don't think he's lost his beans, because he hasn't. It's the center of a theme park that is established, and he gets $40 a ticket to come look at it. Do you think the people in Kentucky are a good audience for going to look at the ark? You bet your life they are. I think he'll get his money back. But nevertheless, more power to him, because it's a wonderful visualization that keeps his story in the forefront of people's thinking. It is a tremendous story, and it's an important story for us today. And for those of us who've been metaphysicians for a long time, we need to rethink it and to know that we really know not someone, universal mind was trying to tell us way back then in the story how to deal with the challenges and the so-called floods of life. I was working with this, and I had the usual interpretations for this story, and then I had a wonderful one of those aha experiences that really deepened my appreciation for how wondrous this story is. I was doing my so-called 20-minute, not so-called, I was doing my 20-minute fast walk that I try to do every day, because they say that's the minimal exercise that'll keep you going, so I do the minimal. But I have found that when I'm doing this walk, as some of you have found, if you run or take fast walks, your mind does open up sometimes, because usually you're not thinking about something specific. So I was going on, and suddenly it just hit me how this story is like the Garden of Eden story that we've shared in this group. of how understanding the Garden of Eden story has to do with evolution. And we won't repeat that story because we don't have all morning, but I suddenly realized the story of Noah and the ark also is an evolutionary story, because what popped through my head as I was walking suddenly was 99% of all species from the beginning of the physical earth, they say, have been washed out. 99% of the species have come and gone. Just like the story tells us, the flood in Noah's time wiped out all the human race. I suddenly thought, someone who understands that this is the story of evolution. It is an increasing expansion of consciousness, and as it has happened, consciousness has tried all sorts of ways to evolve the God idea that is within it, and when it has no longer served that evolutionary purpose, it's gone. And so the Noah story is, I was going to say, is there anybody here that doesn't know the story? Let me quickly tell you the story in case you don't know it. But the story, as the Bible tells it, is that God got very unhappy with the human race. It had just started, because it comes shortly after the Garden of Eden story. So according to the Bible, there's really not that many generations of humankind that have been on earth yet. But God had become very unhappy with them because they're doing all the things that we're doing today. There was conflict. There was divisive thinking, nasty thinking. There was all of this, and God was really put out. But he said, Noah, you, I think, are a good man. And so, Noah, I want you to get your wife, your family, and build an ark, and then take 2 of all the animals in the earth and put them in your ark. And I am going to flood the earth and wipe everybody out but you. And so suddenly I realized this is a story that's telling us that this process was being refreshed. Only the flood did not wipe out everybody, but it prepared the most important part of the story, which is, and I interrupted my telling the story, Noah got everybody on the ark. The floods came for 40 days and 40 nights. It rained. And so they also lingered on for 40 more days in the flood. And finally, Noah put out his birds, and the birds came back and saw that the flood was receding. So the flood went down, and Noah was able to get out of the ark, and he had a conversation with God, and God said, I will no longer do this. Going back to what I said now, that evolution has always proceeded by seeking to develop the God idea, and has brought forth all these different species, leading up to the primates and finally to humanity. But they all have been decimated. We're trying to keep the closest relatives alive today. So that I saw yesterday pictures of a koala bear, only it was a large, so it just had its face. If you ever want to be in love with something, you've got to look at a koala bear right in the face. It is the cutest thing. And so we're striving to keep that alive. So, but 99% of the species that come before have gone. So suddenly realizing that what has happened in this story is we're being told by this mind that worked through the writers some 3,000 years ago that evolution no longer is going to use the wipeout technique of going forward. Humanity is it in terms of producing the next step forward. But there will be clouds. There will be clouds. And we have clouds. Matter of fact, I don't think there have ever been more clouds then we've got clouds today. But the wonderful thing is that with the cloud, there's a rainbow. And the rainbow is the reminder that the best is yet to be. Because God is there in the midst. So I thought of reminding you of some of the clouds that we have. I can't think of a stranger time. I know a little bit about history. I can't think of a stranger time. I was coming down here this morning when my cell phone had a really important message from a dyed-in-the-wool Republican. I just happen to know him. I don't know any Republicans or Democrats, but I just happen to know this one. Anyway, he said, the latest flash, some news commentator just come on, that Hillary Clinton was leaving Ground Zero, where they had a special program, and some of you may have seen it already, and she took a fall. Only it wasn't a natural trip on anything. She collapsed, and just as she get ready to get in the car, and they lost her shoes, and they had to get her shoes and pick them up to the car. I said, oh my gosh, do we need any other clouds to cloud up the coming election? Because you know what the other side's going to do with that one. So anyway, we've got clouds, the Filipino, well, I said I wasn't going to do this, but I can't help it. The Filipino president swearing at our president, and the Chinese aren't cooperating. So anyway, we've got clouds. And then in our personal lives, I'm sure all of us have things that are clouds. So what in the story of Noah and the ark has an answer for us? And the answer is, as it is in all the metaphysical stories that are given to us in the Old Testament, is you look at the meaning of the primary person in the story. And when you look at the meaning of Noah, you find that Noah means rest. Rest. Rest in what? In the ark, which is in the water. And water is symbolic of mind. And when you are floating in all water, you are floating in universal mind. And so the answer to dealing with the flood, as Noah did, or dealing with the clouds that are in our lives, we learn, we practice, we work at centering ourselves, resting in the reality of God's presence in our lives. And when we do, we float through the troubles of our life. Some of you here, I know, have already done this. You've gone through serious challenges in your own life, and people perhaps said to you, I don't know how you did that. You did it because in your mind you knew that you live and move and have your being in God. And God is absolute love. And God is ministering to you in whatever need is required, and will bring forth, as a resultant of the experience, a greater good. A greater good. That's an absolute. That's an absolute. Nothing can change that. But how do you get into the ark? We had this conversation on the golf course. No, it's you over here. This guy too, he was playing and drives over. Is it 300 yards? Was that? Oh, anyway. After I dubbed a few and I looked at him, I said, you suppose I need practice? And they both went, practice, practice, practice. The story is very interesting because it says that Noah was told, take all the animals on earth with you. And he said, take them two, male and female. We talked about this before when we talked about the Garden of Eden story. We have the positive and the negative, which is the absolute principle of the flow of energy of life. And so the way I interpret that is, we're not talking about animals when we get in the ark, we're talking about our thinking. Because when we sometimes try to climb in the ark and get ourselves centered at rest, or perfect peace of knowing that God is in charge of my life, God is in charge of the United States of America, God is in charge of the world. We get into that place where we're affirming that, and then suddenly, whoops, 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 we start to think about all these other thoughts that we've taken that are bothering us. Some of them are negative. We think, oh, I know, but now what's going to happen? I mean, is Hillary going to be able to run? Who am I going to vote for? What's going to happen? But on the other hand, the other side, that would be the negative thinking. But the positive would be, oh boy, this is really going to be good. But anything that we might have. And it is sometimes our positive thoughts that keep us from really centering in peace. We're so busy trying to figure out how God's going to solve all your problems. But that's not the work of the ark. The ark is to be still. Because if we are not still and centered in God, we begin to try to use our power of consciousness to make the good that we think should come out of this situation happen. We have to be very careful that we only act upon that which Spirit brings to us in our lives. I love the fact that in this story, there are so many signs that tell us this is for you. This is a reality. We're told in the Bible story that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And then we're told after 40 days he decided to send out the birds. First he sent out a raven, then he sent out a dove. He sent out a dove for 7 days, and it came back and didn't have anything. He waited 7 days, then he sent out again, and the dove came back with a little twig, and he said, oh, the flood is over. So, what's all that about? Why this 40? Find it all through the Old Testament. Why 40? I've told you before. You suppose anybody would come to church if I started giving exams? 40 means a sufficient period of time. Wherever you find it in the Bible, it means Moses went for 40 days, Jesus went for 40 days in the wilderness. Is that chance? Not chance. They're trying to tell you something. A sufficient period of time. But what about this number 7? I've got a book here that is my favorite book, I think, in my library. It's called Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe. Mathematical Archetypes of Nature, Art, and Science. And this guy is an incredible researcher and writer. And I'm going to read you a little bit from this because I want you to strengthen your realization. These stories are for real. These stories are for real. And the way I want to do that is to confirm the importance of the number 7 that's in this story. But the dove went out for 7 days, came back and sent out for another 7 days. This is what the author writes. 7 is perhaps the most venerated number of the decade. That's decade is 1 through 10. The number par excellence of the ancient world. Its name has been similarly pronounced around the world. And then he gives you Sanskrit, Egyptian, Latin, Arabic, Hebrew vanished. The Greeks, whose word for 7 was hepta, nicknamed it sevo, or veneration. 7 has always predominated in mythology, mysticism, magic, ceremony, and superstition, both lucky and unlucky. Its appeal endures to this day in religion, nursery rhymes, and folk sayings, from the reverent seven angels before the throne to the colloquial 7-year itch. I mean, have you ever thought, where'd that come from, 7-year itch? Our feel for 7ness is a measure of our sensitivity to the archetypal principles of the heptad, which is saying this is a thing of the soul. The number 7 is an important part of the soul understanding. The Bible, literary source of Western culture, contains thousands of references to 7s, heptarcheries, and septenaries, the Greek and Roman terms for 7nesses. 7 lions were in the den with Daniel, and 7 locks of Samson's hair were cut. Joshua's 7 trumpeters circled Jericho 7 times. There were 7 voyages of Sinbad, and 7 wonders of the ancient world. 7 perambulations are around the Kaaba of Mecca. The Muslims go around Mecca 7 times as a part of their ritual. Animals considered clean were admitted to Noah's Ark by 7s. I didn't tell you, but that's in the early part. God said, take them in by 7s. Unclean animals by 2. The 7 liberal arts of medieval education were so named because they represented 7 paths of learning intended to liberate us from a mundane life. Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs is an old tale containing hidden wisdom within its symbolism. You probably know many more references. What is the source of our fascination with 7? What are the principles of heptad for which we accorded such special attention? Just a little bit more. 7 is on everyone's lips at one time or another. When asked to think of a lucky number, you're more than likely to choose 7 or 3. Lottery games often disallow the number 777 to prevent excessive payout due to its popularity. Think of something familiar that comes in 7s. Some people recall the opposite sides of honest dice, add to 7, but most think of the 7 days of the week. This goes on for pages about the part that the number 7 has played in our lives. And of course, 7 means perfection or fulfillment. Perfection or fulfillment. And so it's woven into that. So to wind this up about Noah and the Ark, it is a story that is telling us that we are very much a part of a process of evolution that is carrying the God idea of the Christ into its fulfillment. It started in evolution as we know it. And despite what my doctor said about it never really happened, I think it happened. So did Einstein, by the way, but I think it really happened. So evolution has woven up through that time and is continuing. And along the way, there are going to be challenges. But none of those challenges are going to defeat the purpose of God's idea evolving and unfolding itself, and nothing is going to defeat the purpose of our individual life in terms of what God's purpose for us is in our expression in this lifetime. As long as we keep ourselves centered in God. The easiest way to do that, the easiest way to keep yourself centered in God without working at it, going into deep meditation, is, I asked you this question last week and you bombed out. The And this week you're going to get it. The easiest way to do it is love God with all your heart and soul and mind. You know, we went back to, what was that Phil Pierson talking about all the time? It isn't that hard. If you love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, obviously you're there, you know, and you feel yourself at rest in that truth that God is there, because I love God. I can feel that presence. And as I feel that presence, I know that whatever the clouds are, they will dissipate as I go forward and float in that consciousness of my oneness with God that I love so much. Let's close our eyes and for a moment feel the reality that each one of us, as individual expressions of the God idea, are walking a path, that each of us have clouds that float into our lives. And let us rejoice together in knowing that each one of us is equipped to move past those clouds and into the glorious vision of the rainbow that affirms for us the good is now, but the best is yet to be. Though blessed presence, we give thanks that today in our hearts and in our minds we can feel this, and we are so grateful. Thank you, God. I think we'll sing our peace song today. In the spirit of 9/11, let's sing our peace song. Shall we rise? As you go forth, may you know that the light of God surrounds you, the love of God enfolds you, the power of God protects you, and the presence of God watches over you. Wherever you are, God is.